Fortnite Season 3 is here, and with it, a bunch of new items and strategies to learn. So let's go over 50 tips you need to know in order to get ahead of the meta. First, we need to talk about the 3 brand new medallions and their bosses. First, we'll start off with probably the best for competitive, even though they're all really good, and that's Megalodon, who can be found at Brutal Beachhead. You might be wondering what makes his Quinn so good, and it's because it gives you infinite nitro, which we'll touch more on later. But essentially, it's like a pepper on crack, giving you the ability to sprint faster and for longer. On top of that, you get 2 other items with it. The first is the mythic combat shotgun, which is much better compared to the regular one, so I'd recommend just using the pumper gatekeeper if you don't have the mythic. Last but definitely not least, you get the mythic nitro fist, which again we'll talk more on later, but the only difference between the mythic version and the regular one is that you get 5 charges instead of 4. Just over to the east, you have Redline Rig and the Machinist. This medallion recharges health just like the ones from Season 1, but this time it goes up until you have 75 shield. Weapons wise, she drops the mythic combat assault rifle, which is very similar to the Ares mythic AR we saw last season, but definitely better. And right away, Peterbot and Pollo are trying to claim this drop, so that alone should tell you that it's good. Lastly, we have the Ringmaster's medallion, which spawns at the Nitrodome. This one gives you infinite ammo and a slight damage increase, but of course that's not it, because you also get the mythic boom bolt, which is very similar to the boom bow. And I think it goes without saying, but this combo together is really broken. It's also worth noting for all the mythic bosses in tournaments that they will always spawn at their POIs, and in pubs, the Megalodon and Machinist have a chance of spawning somewhere random on the map. That's it for mythic bosses, however there's still 3 other mythic guns you can get on the map. Going all the way to Classic Courts, you have Oscar who spawns there, and you can fight him for his auto shotgun. Then over at Grim Gate, you can do the exact same thing with Cerberus and the mythic gatekeeper. Now these 2 won't be in competitive since they don't spawn, however the final mythic gun will be. Back in chapter 4 we saw the island give you different mythic items, and now it's back, this time dropping you a mythic deagle, which is pretty good and you can do almost 200 damage with a headshot. Next, I need to go over nitro, and there's 4 different ways you can get it. The first way I already went over with a medallion. The other 3 is that you can get it from nitro splashes, nitro barrels, or going through the nitro hoops. Once you actually get the nitro effect, let's just say it's extremely chaotic. When sprinting, if you run into builds, it will do 300 damage, which means it instantly destroys any wood and brick. It will leave fully built metal at 200 HP, but if you do it before it fully builds, it should break. You might not have realized this, but if you run to the middle of a fully built metal box, you'll actually end up damaging every single wall and the cone in it for 300 damage. And obviously with the brick or wood, it will completely destroy it. But that's not it. If you slide it instead of sprinting, you'll end up doing 325 damage. I know this isn't an insane difference, but maybe it'll help you out in one of your future games. On top of all that structure damage, if you end up hitting a player, you'll actually do a whopping 75 damage to them. But now let's talk about the movement aspect of it. When using any of those 3 ways to get nitro, it will last for 20 seconds, making you run faster, and it will instantly replenish your stamina, which will also last for 20 seconds if you constantly sprint. This is way faster since regular sprinting will only last for around 7 seconds, taking you around 50 meters away, compared to using the nitro where you can travel 180 meters in those 20 seconds. But if you want to go even further, you can combine sprinting with jumping and sliding, and you can go almost 100 meters further. One thing you might not have realized as well is that your stamina actually recharges much faster than normal with the nitro effect. This is pretty broken, but when using hoops, you can do a whole lot more to send yourself across the entire map. Just using it normally will send you anywhere between 60 to 90 meters, depending on which one you hit, since they spawn at all of these different locations on the map with different terrain. But it's when you mix it with the fizz that things get pretty insane. Just normally hitting it with the fizz will send you over 160 meters away. But just like before, if you combine it with perfectly timing your slide and jump, you can send yourself almost 500 meters away by the time it runs out. One of the last little things you need to know about nitro is when activated, you never actually take fall damage, so keep that in mind. This next tip is very important to know, and that's that you should subscribe if you made it this far into the video, and if you do, you'll instantly get better, trust me. The last interesting addition we'll talk about with the nitro is that you can casually become Jesus and run on water. However, this only works when you're sprinting, so if you just walk onto it normally, you'll just swim. Before we talk about one of the most broken items ever added into the game that will easily be the movement meta this season, let's go over some other quick tips which will help you win games. First is that there's a few areas on the map that have slurp water. This water heals you for white HP and shield, however it takes an extremely long time to actually get healed up to max. Also, whenever you're in zone, it doesn't actually heal you at all. But if you're looking for some quick heals in the same area, you're in luck, because there's now slurp cacti that give you 30 shield or HP, and here are the spawns on the map. You may have glossed over this next one with all the crazy stuff that's been added, but there's now 3 geysers in the middle of the map where the lake used to be. Just normally hitting them will bring you around 75 meters in the air, but when you combine this with the fizz, it'll actually send you over 100 meters. Now I tried this with the nitro splashes to see if it did anything, and to be honest I couldn't really tell because it seemed like it only changed by a few meters. So with that being said, I'm just gonna say it doesn't work. And if you were wondering if maybe it worked with launch pads, well sadly it still doesn't do anything. But something that does work now are big ammo crates. If you remember a few seasons back, whenever you would open one, you had a chance of getting a heal item out of it. And now you can actually get nitro splashes and heals. However, those heals seem to be pretty rare since the nitro splashes have a very high spawn rate in them. Speaking of heals though, we also have a new healing item, the Nuka-Cola from Fallout, which is very similar to a slurp juice. It takes 3 seconds to use, and once popped, it'll instantly heal 25 of your white HP, then quickly over time will heal 75 shield. Now you can only carry 2 of them at a time, and even though it's really good for shields, you're probably better off just using the same heals as last season. With that being said though, it's probably the best heals for zero builds, and with zero build cash cups being added this season, we'll probably see them a lot there. Now let's finally talk about the item, which is looking like a big problem for comp, the Nitro Fists. They can be found either as a floor spawn or in chest. I already went over the mythic version and how it has 1 extra charge, which is the only actual difference. This means both of them do 230 structure damage to builds in just 1 hit. But if you opt to actually jump then use the punch mid-air, you'll actually do 270. As far as the uppercut goes, it does the same structure damage. This will also end up being the new movement item this season instead of carrying the nitro splashes, because you can only carry 4 of these. But with the fists, they actually recharge over time, meaning it's infinite use. How far can you actually go with them? 1 uppercut will send you 16 meters up. However, if you use all 4 charges, you'll go 60 meters. Again, using just 1 punch will send you roughly 25 meters away, and using 4 while looking up diagonally will bring you 140 meters away. We can't forget about combining this with fizz, since it always makes everything so much better. Interestingly enough though, 4 uppercuts only get you up to 72 meters, which isn't that big of a difference, and it's somewhat the same with the punches, bringing you to 162 meters. But the downside of using the fizz while doing it is that you float in the air for a little bit, so if the person has good aim, you're kind of just a free Kovacs course. So keep that in mind when you're using it. Now that's all pretty good, but it's really broken when you start punching people. The normal punch does 55 damage, but if you air punch them, it'll do 70, and for the uppercut, it's 60. It also looks like a bunch of pro players are already loving it so far, and from the few scrim games there's been this season, well, it's pretty wild. So with that being said, I have a feeling they will get nerfed, but who knows. The last item we need to talk about is the new boom bolt. As I'm sure you all know, this takes rocket ammo since it explodes, but because of that, the ammo is quite rare. However, that brings us all the way back to tip number 7 with the Ringmaster, who drops the mythic version and gives you infinite ammo. So since you go through your shots pretty quickly and most of the time you won't have the medallion, carrying it is only really useful when you're W keying. So we'll have more tips on that later. The initial shot of the purple rarity will do 44 damage to the body and 79 for a headshot. Then afterwards, the explosion does 70. You also need to know that the radius of the explosion is half a tile away, so if the enemy is more than that, it won't actually do anything. The damage to players is pretty good, but where it really shines is the structure damage. Once it's shot, it will do an initial 42 damage, then the explosion does a whopping 190, totaling the damage to 232. On top of this insane damage, it works very similar to running into structures with nitro, meaning it damages every single build except for the one on the opposite side of the explosion. You can also hit players through walls with it, but it only actually does 4, so it's not that useful. Another little trick you can use, which was shown to me by Junkman, is if you were fighting a player and you're trying to take their top floor, you can get it to around 40 HP, then shoot your bow. This will instantly break the floor, then drop the arrow into the box, then exploding and damaging the opponent. Now this doesn't work if they're holding the floor, however it's really easy if you just simply pretend that you're going for a different build, then quickly shoot it. Let's circle back around to the fist again with some interesting tricks. If you have a player in a 1x2, you can go right up to them, put yourself in a cone underneath, then use the uppercut. This will break the front wall, perfectly sending you into their box, completely catching them off guard. Another thing you can do when rotating out of a box is by editing your cone like a ramp, then going to the back of the box, jump and use the punch. Doing this is a bit more safe since none of your builds break, but admittedly it's not super useful, only really in duos if you're in a stacked lobby. Another thing you should know for this season is that since there's only 3 medallions on on the map now, if you have one, your rough location on the map will actually be much smaller than before, since like I said, there's only 3 of them instead of 5. The last tip is if you're trying to get into someone's box or just end a fight faster, you can stand roughly 14 meters away, then jump and use the punch, and this will send you perfectly into the back of their box, catching them off guard. That was 50 tips you need to know to do well this season, so if you found that helpful, please leave a like, subscribe, and check out these videos here. Have an amazing rest of your days. Peace out.